When love turns into poison, even the air you breathe becomes a weapon against you. And that's how I discovered that the person who was supposed to protect me had been planning my destruction from the very first glance. Good afternoon, my dears. This is Grandma Nellie, with my 76 years well lived, speaking directly from my little home in Savannah, Georgia. A city that holds stories between its cobblestone streets and the gentle waves at Tybee Beach. The sound of the ocean has always calmed me, even during the darkest days of my life. Today, I've decided to share with you a story I've kept in my heart for more than 5 decades. Before I begin, I want to thank all of you who are following my channel. If you're enjoying my story, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from. It could be your city, your state, or even your country if you're far from our United States. Grandma loves knowing that people from all over are listening to me. It brings such joy to my heart. And did you know there's a $700 giveaway happening on this channel among all subscribers? Just comment where you're watching from and give this video a thumbs up, and you'll automatically be entered to participate. So comment below. I was born in 1949. In a small town called Oak Ridge in rural Kentucky, a place where gossip traveled faster than the creek water during heavy rain, and where everybody knew everybody's business. My childhood wasn't the easiest. My father, well, I only knew his name, Joseph Carter. According to my mother, Dorothy, he went out to buy cigarettes when I was 2 years old and never came back. Went to buy cigarettes in another country, she would say bitterly whenever I asked. I grew up with just my mother. But just doesn't mean well. Dorothy was a difficult woman, the kind who seemed to be born with bile instead of a heart. She worked as a laundress, scrubbing other people's clothes from dawn to dusk, and unloaded all the frustration that life had piled on her onto me. One wrong look, one word too loud, and her slipper would come flying in my direction. "You're just like your father, Nellie, a burden I carry," she would say almost every day. "If it weren't for you, I could have found another man, had a better life." I grew up believing I was a mistake, a problem, an inconvenience. I woke up walking on eggshells, went to bed praying I wouldn't give her a reason to be angry the next day. The house where we lived was small, one room divided by an old sheet that served as a wall between the living room and the bedroom. No privacy, no peace, no rest. It was against this backdrop that I met Arnold at 17. I was working at a grocery store downtown, arranging shelves and working the register. He walked in one December afternoon, tall, strong, with a smile that lit up the whole place. He asked for a pack of cigarettes and, while I was looking for change, looked at me in a way nobody ever had before. "What's your name, miss?" he asked. "Nellie," I answered, feeling my face burn with embarrassment. "Pretty name for a pretty girl," he said, taking the change and leaving a small business card in my hand. "I work at City Hall. If you need anything, just come find me." I kept that card like it was treasure. Arnold Wilson, Public Works Department, City Hall. An important man, educated, handsome, had shown interest in me. The girl who grew up hearing she was a burden, a problem, leftovers. In the days that followed, he began to frequent the store. He always bought something small, a candy, a soda, a newspaper, and would chat with me during the quiet moments when the store was empty. He talked about the town, about City Hall projects, asked about my life. I told him little, afraid that once he knew my reality, he would lose interest. "You deserve better, Nellie," he told me one day, after I let slip about the hardship of living with my mother. "A girl like you should be treated like a princess." Princess. Nobody had ever called me that. I, who grew up being the maid in my own home, washing, ironing, cooking, hearing complaints, was now a princess in someone's eyes. Our courtship began right there, in the grocery store. No formal proposal, no ring, none of that. Just the certainty that we would meet every day, that we would talk, that he would look at me in that special way that made my heart race. My mother, of course, didn't like it one bit when she found out. "A City Hall man interested in you? He must be married or looking to take advantage. Decent men don't look at fatherless girls." But for the first time in my life, I didn't listen to her. Arnold made me feel special, important, worthy of love, and I clung to that with all my strength. Our meetings were always in public places, in the town square, at the church steps, at the ice cream parlor. He was respectful, never tried anything that might stain my reputation, always treating me as his princess, telling me about the places he had seen, promising that one day he would take me to see the world, too. 6 months after we met, Arnold proposed. It was one evening in the town square, under a blossoming redbud tree. He took a small box with a simple but beautiful ring from his pocket, knelt right there in front of everyone. "Nellie, you've brought light to my life. Will you marry me?" I didn't even need to answer. My eyes were already saying yes before my mouth could form the words. A decent, hard-working man who loved me wanted to take me away from that life of sadness with my mother. It was everything I had always dreamed of and never thought I deserved. When I told my mother, I thought she would oppose it with all her might. But to my surprise, she reacted in a strange way. She remained silent, looking at me in a way I couldn't decipher, and then said something I'll never forget. "He already came to talk to me before. Asked for your hand, said he would take care of you, and me too." I was confused. Arnold had never mentioned this, never said he had spoken with my mother. Why would he hide something like that from me? But I was so intoxicated with happiness that I let it go. Maybe it was a surprise. Maybe he wanted to do everything properly, the traditional way. The wedding was set for 3 months later. Time enough to get the documents in order, borrow a dress from the store owner's daughter, arrange a simple reception in the church hall. It wouldn't be anything grand, but it would be mine. It would be the beginning of my liberation. On my wedding day, I looked at myself in the improvised mirror in our house and barely recognized myself. The white dress, even though it was second-hand, transformed me. My hair done by the neighbor who was a hairdresser, pink lipstick on my lips, a sparkle of happiness in my eyes that I had never seen before. "You look nice," my mother said dryly, as if the words cost her something to say. He got lucky. It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd received from her in my entire life. The ceremony was simple and quick. Arnold looked handsome in his navy blue suit, hair neatly combed, the smile that won me now officially mine for the rest of my life. When the pastor declared us husband and wife, I felt that finally my life was truly going to begin. The surprise came after the small reception. I thought we were going to the house Arnold had rented, as he had told me. But the car stopped in front of my mother's house. "What are we doing here?" I asked, confused. "Surprise, my love," he said, kissing my hand. "I renovated your mother's house. We're going to live here with her." My heart froze. Live with my mother? Continue in that house that only brought me bad memories? This wasn't the plan. This wasn't the liberation I was expecting. "But you told me we would have our own house. And we will, princess. But your mother is alone. She's getting older. We can't abandon her. Family is important. And now we're a family, the 3 of us." His smile remained the same, but there was something in his eyes, something I couldn't identify at the time, that should have warned me. A different gleam, calculating. But I was so confused, so caught between the joy of the wedding and the shock of the news, that I let it pass. We entered the house. Indeed, it was different. Fresh paint, some new furniture, even a radio in the living room. But it was still that house, those walls that had witnessed so many humiliations. And my mother was there, waiting for us, with a smile I had never seen before. A smile that should have also warned me. "Welcome to our home," she said, hugging Arnold first, then giving me a quick, awkward hug. "I'm so happy we're all going to live together." That first night, as a married woman, lying in the bed that Arnold had bought for our room, actually, the same space where I used to sleep, only now with a real wall separating it from the living room, I tried to convince myself that everything would be fine, that his love would compensate for my mother's constant presence, that that house could transform into a happy home. Arnold was affectionate, patient, treated me with respect, made me feel loved for the first time in my life. I fell asleep in his arms, believing that, despite the unpleasant surprise, my future would be happy beside that man. But little did I know that that night was just the beginning of a nightmare disguised as a love dream, that that man who called me princess had plans very different from making me happy, that my own mother, the one who should protect me, was involved in a plot that would destroy everything I was. The first months of marriage were like walking through a minefield disguised as a flower garden. On the outside, everything seemed perfect. Arnold was attentive, brought gifts, introduced me as his princess to everyone in town. Even my relationship with my mother seemed to be improving. She no longer yelled at me, no longer criticized my every move. She observed our interaction with a strange silence, almost as if she was waiting for something. But gradually, small things began to change. Arnold decided everything: what I wore, what I ate, who I could talk to. Always with a smile, always saying it was for my own good, that he wanted to protect me from the outside world. "Princesses don't need to work," he said, when I announced I wanted to return to the grocery store. "I'll take care of you. Your only concern should be making me happy." And so, without realizing it, I became a prisoner in that house I had so wanted to leave. The prince who came to rescue me had transformed into my jailer, and the worst was just beginning. 6 months after the wedding, I realized that the chains of love can be as heavy as those of hate, and how blind are the eyes of someone who wants so desperately to be loved. The change came slowly, like water dripping and forming a puddle without you noticing. Arnold started coming home later from work, smelling of cigarettes and whiskey. The man who before didn't drink, because I need to always be clear-headed to take care of my princess, now arrived stumbling, with a different look that gave me chills. The first time he raised his voice at me was because of a dinner I took too long to prepare. I had been waiting for him for hours, the food already cold, when he came in slamming the door. "What kind of garbage food is this? Cold like this? Is this how you welcome your husband after a whole day working to support this house?" My mother, sitting in the corner of the living room, said nothing. She just observed with those eyes that seemed to know exactly what was coming. "I'm sorry, Arnold. You were late, and the food—" I didn't finish the sentence. The slap came hard, making my face turn with the impact. The taste of blood invaded my mouth as I tried to understand what had happened. My husband, my prince, had hit me, in front of my mother. "Never talk back to me. Never make excuses. You are my wife, and you'll do what I say when I say it, the way I say it." I looked at my mother, expecting any reaction, any word in my defense. But she just got up, went to the kitchen, and came back with the plate she had kept in the oven. "I heated it up for you, Arnold. Nellie didn't mean any harm. She's still learning to be a good wife." That night, lying next to the man who hours before had assaulted me, I cried silently. I wanted to believe it was an accident, that he was stressed, that it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe I was still his princess. But that was just the beginning. The aggressions became more frequent, for increasingly insignificant reasons: poorly ironed clothes, coffee that was too weak, a word out of place. And my mother, who had suffered at the hands of so many men who should protect me, just watched, as if she was satisfied that I was finally tasting the same bile she had. A year after the wedding, in 1968, Arnold lost his job at City Hall. I never knew the real reason. He said it was political persecution, that he hadn't bowed to the new mayor's dishonest requests. But the rumors in town were different. They spoke of missing money, of bribes, of shady favors. It was during this period that things got drastically worse. Without work, Arnold spent his days at home, drinking from early on, controlling my every move. I couldn't go to the market alone, couldn't visit the neighbor, couldn't even stay in the yard without his permission. "Why do you want to go out? To show yourself to other men? To embarrass your husband in town?" The drinking, which was occasional before, became a daily companion, and with it came a cruelty that was just dormant inside him. Words that cut deeper than a knife, humiliations that destroyed any crumb of self-esteem I might still have. "You think another man would want garbage like you? I took you out of the trash, Nellie. Gave you a name, gave you a roof, made you somebody. And this is how you thank me?" On one of the coldest nights of that winter, something changed. Arnold came home late, drunker than usual. I was in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes, when I felt his heavy hands on my shoulders. "Come here, woman. Today you're going to please me properly." I tried to escape, saying I needed to finish the dishes, that I was tired, any excuse to delay the inevitable. But he dragged me to the living room, threw me on the old sofa we had gotten from the neighbors. The door to my mother's room was open. She was in there. She could see everything, hear everything. "Mom!" I shouted, hoping she would do something, anything. She appeared at the door, looked at the scene for a moment, and instead of helping me, just said, "Don't make a scene, Nellie. He's your husband. He has the right. You think it was different for me?" And she closed the door, leaving me alone with the monster I had called husband, with the nightmare I had mistaken for salvation. That was the first of many nights of horror. Arnold no longer cared about pretending, no longer worried about closing doors or lowering his voice. He seemed to make a point of having my mother hear, of having her know exactly what was happening. Sometimes she didn't even close the door. She would sit there on her bed, looking through the opening, as if she were watching a soap opera on the TV we didn't have. Her eyes showed no compassion, no horror. They showed something worse, satisfaction. As if each pain of mine was a payment for some old debt, some guilt I carried just for existing. I tried to escape once. I gathered the little money I managed to hide when Arnold sent me to shop, took a small bundle of clothes, and waited for him to leave for one of his drinking sessions. But when I was at the door, ready to leave that hell behind, I ran into my mother. "Where do you think you're going?" "Away, Mom. I can't take it anymore. Please, let me go." She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled in a way I'll never forget. "And where will you go? Who will want a used woman like you? What do you know how to do besides take beatings? Are you going to become a woman of the streets? Is that it? Shame this family even more? Anything is better than this, Mom. Why don't you help me? Why do you let him do these things to me? Why do you watch? Because you need to understand what real life is like, Nellie. I went through this. My mother went through this. It's the fate of women like us. At least you have a roof, have food on the table. You think it's better out there?" In that moment, I understood that I was alone, that I couldn't count on anyone in that town, much less the woman who brought me into the world. That hell wasn't the walls of that house. It was the people inside it. I went back to the room, put the bundle under the bed, and prepared for another night of terror. Hope, which they say is the last to die, was agonizing inside me. The months turned into years. 3 years a prisoner of a marriage that was anything but a union. 3 years serving as a punching bag during the day and an object at night. 3 years watching my mother transform into a silent spectator of my destruction. The body gets used to pain, you know. After a while, you don't even feel the blows like before. It seems to create a shell, a protection. But the soul never gets used to it. Each humiliation is like the first. Each cruel word cuts deep as if it were new. I remember one day, in 1970, when I was sweeping the yard and heard voices on the street. It was a group of young women, some I knew from school, passing by animated, laughing, free. One of them looked at me, waved, then whispered something to the others. I saw in their eyes the pity, the judgment, perhaps even gratitude that they weren't in my place. That night, alone in the bathroom, I looked in the broken mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. Where was the dreamy girl from before? The young woman who believed in princes and castles? In her place was a woman with dead eyes, marked body, shattered soul. At 21, I seemed to have lived 3 lives, all of them of suffering. But fate, my dears, is a funny thing. When you think you've hit rock bottom, that there's no way out, it comes and surprises you. Sometimes for worse, sometimes it sends a hero from where you least expect. In December 1971, something changed. Arnold, who hadn't worked for more than 2 years, living off odd jobs and the money I earned washing clothes for others since he finally realized we needed money for his alcohol, came home with a man. A stranger, older, with graying hair and an upright posture. "Nellie, come here, woman. We have a visitor." I dried my hands on the dirty apron and went to the living room, head down as I had learned to walk in that house. I didn't look any man in the eyes, not since a cookware salesman had the misfortune of greeting me with too much sympathy and ended up being kicked out by Arnold's shouting. "Good afternoon," I said quietly, without raising my gaze. "This is Nellie, my wife," Arnold said with that false pride he showed to strangers, as if we were the happiest couple in the world. "Nellie, this is Mr. Robert. He's interested in buying the back lot." "Back lot? What lot?" Our house barely had a yard, let alone a lot. But I had learned not to question, not in front of other people. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Nellie." The man's voice was deep, measured, with a different accent. "I hope I'm not disturbing." Something in that voice made me raise my eyes, and when I looked at that man's face, I felt a strange chill. There was something familiar about him, something I couldn't identify, but that made my heart race. "Not at all," I replied automatically, lowering my gaze again. "Robert will stay for dinner," Arnold announced, already sitting down and signaling for the man to join him. "Bring us some whiskey and go prepare something decent." I obeyed, as I always did. But while warming up the meat that was left over from lunch and cutting the potatoes to fry, I couldn't stop thinking about that man. Why did he seem familiar? And what was this story about? A lot. My mother entered the kitchen, her eyes shining in a strange way. "Did you see who's there?" she asked, her voice trembling a little. "A man who wants to buy a lot that doesn't exist," I replied without looking at her. "Don't be stupid, Nellie. Look at him properly. Don't you notice anything?" I shook my head, confused. What did she mean? "That man," she began, but stopped when we heard footsteps. Arnold appeared at the kitchen door. "What are you two talking about? Is the food ready yet? Robert is waiting." My mother moved away, returning to her room, leaving me with more questions than answers. I finished preparing the food and took it to the living room, where the two men were talking animatedly, the whiskey bottle already half empty. During dinner, I felt Robert's eyes on me several times. It wasn't the lascivious look I was used to receiving from Arnold's friends. It was something different, almost protective. I couldn't define it, but it made me uneasy. I served the food, washed the dishes, stayed in my corner as expected. Their conversation revolved around money, business, things I didn't fully understand. Arnold seemed excited, gesturing, promising facilities, access to documents. It was late when the man finally said goodbye. At the door, he looked at me intensely and said something that kept hammering in my head for days. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Nellie. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, and sometimes what seems lost forever finds a way back." I didn't understand what he meant, not at that moment, but something in the way he spoke, as if he had a secret that only the two of us shared, left me restless. That night, Arnold didn't beat me, didn't force me. He was too happy with the prospect of easy money, counting coins he didn't yet have, making plans I doubted would materialize. Lying in bed, listening to his heavy snoring after the drinking binge, I thought about the stranger, his look, his enigmatic words, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I had almost forgotten what it was like. Curiosity, a desire to know more, to understand what was happening. I didn't know yet, but that dinner, that seemingly casual encounter, would be the beginning of a turning point in my life, the start of a journey that would lead me back to myself, that would reveal secrets buried for decades, that would finally free me from the chains I didn't even know I carried since birth. The gray-haired man would return, and with him, all the truth that had been hidden from me. A truth that would turn my world upside down and show me that sometimes the real monsters aren't the ones that appear in fairy tales, but those who sleep under the same roof as you, who share your blood, who should protect you, but chose to destroy you. They say that truth is like water. It always finds a way to come to the surface, no matter how many barriers are placed in its path. And that's exactly what happened in that January of 1972. When I discovered that the walls of my house held secrets much deeper than I could ever imagine. After that first dinner, Robert began to appear frequently, always with some excuse related to the so-called back lot, documents to sign, measurements to make, details to settle. Arnold, blinded by greed and the possibility of easy money, welcomed him with open arms, displaying an enthusiasm he only showed when he had a glass of whiskey in his hand. During one of these visits, while Arnold went out to get more drinks from the corner bar, I found myself alone with Robert in the living room. My mother was in the yard, hanging clothes on the line, and for the first time, I had a chance to really look at this man who intrigued me so much. "Are you well, Mrs. Nellie?" he asked with a kindness I hadn't experienced in a long time. "Yes, thank you," I replied automatically, like a robot programmed to say what they expected to hear. "You don't have to lie to me," he said, lowering his voice. "I have eyes. I see how he treats you. I see the bruises you try to hide. I froze. No one ever talked about this. It was the open secret that the whole town knew but pretended not to see. The neighbors saw my black eyes and asked if I had slept badly. The shopkeepers noticed my cut lips and commented on the dry weather that cracked the skin. The collective hypocrisy that allowed women like me to suffer in silence. I don't know what you're talking about, I murmured, looking at the door, fearing that Arnold might return at any moment. Yes, you do, and I want you to know that you don't have to live like this. No one deserves this, least of all you. Before I could respond, we heard footsteps in the yard. My mother came in, looked at the two of us with a strange expression, a mix of fear and anger. "What are you two talking about?" she asked, standing between us as if to separate us. "Just commenting on the weather, Mrs. Dorothy," Robert replied calmly. "This summer is particularly hot, don't you think?" Something in the way he said her name, in the tone he used, made my mother pale. She muttered something and quickly left the room as if she were running from a ghost. That reaction intrigued me. My mother, who was afraid of nothing and no one, who faced life with the hardness of someone who had seen the worst, seemed scared of this man. Why? In the days that followed, I began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She became agitated when she knew Robert was coming, tidied herself up more than usual, alternated between moments of extreme irritation and periods of contemplative silence. One morning, while washing clothes in the yard basin, she approached, looking around as if to verify that we were really alone. "This Robert? Did he tell you anything? About me? About the past?" "No, Mom. Why do you ask?" She studied me for a moment, as if trying to decide if I was lying. "No reason. Just be careful with him. Men like that, who appear out of nowhere offering help, always have ulterior motives." "What kind of help? He's only interested in the lot, isn't he?" My mother gave a dry laugh without humor. "Lot? Sure, that's what Arnold thinks." Before I could question her further, Arnold appeared at the gate, stumbling, drunk even though it was only noon. My mother quickly moved away, leaving me with more questions than answers. That afternoon, the hell I lived in daily got worse. Arnold, irritated for some reason that only existed in his drunken mind, began breaking things around the house, shouting senseless accusations. "You've been having little talks with that old man, haven't you? You think I don't see the looks between you? You think I'm an idiot?" I tried to calm him down, swear there was nothing, that he was imagining things, but alcoholic fury doesn't listen to reason, doesn't accept explanations. The first blow hit my stomach, making me double over in pain. The second, on my back, when I was already down. I lost count of how many came after. I only know that at some point, the pain was so great that I couldn't feel it anymore. I heard, as if from very far away, his screams, the insults, the threats. And I also heard something else, the silence of my mother, who watched everything from the bedroom door without moving a finger to help me. When he finally stopped, exhausted from beating me so much, Arnold threw himself in the chair, opening another bottle. "That's for you to learn. Next time I catch you being cute with that old man, I won't stop until I kill you." I dragged myself to the bathroom, leaving a trail of blood on the floor. In the broken mirror, I saw what was left of my face, one eye already closing from swelling, split lip, red marks that would soon turn purple spread across my face. "Let me clean that," I heard my mother's voice behind me. She entered the tiny bathroom bringing a damp cloth and a basin with water. "Why, Mom?" I asked, my voice almost inaudible from weakness. "Why do you let him do this to me? Why don't you help me?" She wet the cloth and began to clean the blood from my face, with a gentleness she never showed in everyday life. Her eyes were distant, as if she were seeing something far beyond that cramped bathroom. "You would never understand, Nellie. Some debts need to be paid. Some wounds need to be passed on so they can finally heal." "What debts? What wounds? What are you talking about?" She continued cleaning my wounds in silence for a moment, then sighed deeply. "Your father. You think he simply went out to buy cigarettes and never came back, don't you? That's what I've told you all your life." I nodded, confused, not understanding what this had to do with the beating I had just taken, with the life of horror I had been living for years. "The truth is more complicated, daughter. Your father didn't abandon me. I drove him away. After years of suffering at his hands, I found the strength to send him away, to threaten him with death if he returned. I was shocked. In all these years, the story I had heard was different. Of the irresponsible father who abandoned wife and small daughter out of cowardice, out of selfishness. Why did you never tell me this? Why the lie? She wrung the cloth in the basin, the water turning red with my blood. Because it was easier to make you hate him than to explain why we couldn't have him in our lives. You were too young to understand. And what does this have to do with Arnold? With what I'm going through now? A strange smile, almost cruel, formed on her prematurely aged face. Everything, my daughter. It has everything to do with it. Sometimes, to break a curse, you have to go through it first. You needed to understand, in your skin, what I went through. You needed to feel the same, to value what I did for us both. My blood froze. I couldn't be hearing right. It couldn't be what I was thinking. Mom, are you saying that you let Arnold treat me like this on purpose? That you chose him for this? She didn't answer directly, but her eyes said it all. There was a sick satisfaction there, a silent revenge being executed for years, not against me, I realized at that moment, but through me. Your father made me suffer in ways you can't imagine, Nellie. I swore he would pay, that he would feel in his soul what he made me feel in my flesh. But he left. I'm paying for something I didn't even see, that I wasn't even part of. She finished cleaning my face and stood up, throwing the bloodied cloth in the basin. He may have gone away, but he left part of himself here. In you, in your eyes, in your manner. In every gesture that reminds me of him. She left the bathroom, leaving me in shock, trying to process what I had just heard. My own mother had orchestrated my suffering as a distorted form of revenge against my father, had used me as an instrument to punish a man I never knew. That night, lying on the hard bed, with my body aching and my soul shattered, I made a decision. I needed to get out of there. No matter how, no matter where. I needed to escape before that house, those people, that hatred consumed me completely. But how? Without money? Without support? Without anyone to turn to? The whole town pretended not to see. The police didn't get involved in family matters. The church preached the submission of wife to husband. That's when I remembered Robert. The understanding look, the kind words, the veiled offer of help. Could it be? Could he be the only person willing to extend a hand to me in that sea of indifference? The problem was how to contact him. Arnold would never allow it, and after the beating that day, I was sure he would be even more vigilant. My mother, now that she had revealed her true nature, was more enemy than ally. The opportunity came a few days later, when Robert appeared without warning one afternoon, when Arnold had gone out to resolve something at City Hall, probably another scheme to get money. I was in the yard, hanging clothes on the line, my face still marked by the recent violence, when I heard his voice calling me from the gate. "Mrs. Nellie, may I come in? I need to speak with Arnold about the lot documents." I looked around, nervous. My mother had gone to the market. We were alone. It was now or never. "He's not here," I replied, approaching the gate. "But I need to speak with you. It's urgent." Robert entered, his face hardening when he saw the marks on my face, the bruises that the long-sleeved dress couldn't completely hide. My God, what did he do to you? I couldn't answer. The tears, which I had repressed for so long, came like a flood, uncontrollable. I collapsed right there, in the middle of the yard, sobbing like a child. Robert approached, hesitant, as if afraid of startling me. "It's okay, Nellie. You can cry. Sometimes that's what we need to start healing." Between sobs, I told him everything. The years of abuse, the increasingly worse aggressions, the recent discovery about my mother's participation in that nightmare. I spoke non-stop, as if a dam had broken inside me, releasing at once all the horror I had kept inside. He listened in silence, his eyes growing harder, more determined with each word of mine. When I finished, exhausted and relieved at the same time for finally having spoken aloud the whole truth, he held my hands in his. "Nellie, there's something I need to tell you, something that will change everything you believe you know about your life." I looked at him, confused, unable to imagine what could be so important at that moment, when all I wanted was to escape, survive, Start over anywhere far from there. There is no lot, he began, his voice heavy with contained emotion. There never was. It was just an excuse to get close, to enter this house, to find you. I don't understand. Why? Who are you really? He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me tremble. My real name isn't Robert. It's Joseph Carter, and I am your father, Nellie. The world seemed to stop in that instant. The man before me, the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere offering business to Arnold, was the ghost that had haunted my life forever. The man who, according to my mother, had abandoned us. The man who, according to her recent confession, she had driven away. My father? The word sounded strange in my mouth, an almost abstract concept for someone who grew up without this figure. Yes, daughter, I know it's a shock, that you must be confused, angry perhaps. You have every right, but I need you to listen to me. The story you know isn't true. Neither the first version your mother told, nor this new one she invented. I leaned against the wall, my legs weak from the revelation. My father, there, in front of me. After so many years believing I had been abandoned, rejected, forgotten. Why now? Where were you all these years? Why did you let all this happen to me? His hands, wrinkled by time but still strong, trembled slightly. It's a long and painful story, Nellie, and we don't have much time before your mother or Arnold returns. But I promise to tell you everything, explain every detail. Now the most important thing is to get you out of here, ensure your safety. Part of me wanted to scream, demand immediate answers, unload on him all the accumulated pain of a life of abandonment. But another part, perhaps wiser, understood that this moment was crucial, that I couldn't waste it with recriminations that could wait. How? Arnold will never let me go. And my mother, she'll tell him. She'll help him find me. I have a plan. It's not perfect, but it's our best chance. It will require courage, Nellie. More courage than you've already shown just by surviving all these years in this hell. At that moment, we heard the front gate opening. My mother's voice called from the entrance, announcing she had returned from the market. Robert, or rather my father, quickly moved away, whispering, "Tomorrow, at 3 in the afternoon. I'll be waiting in the church square with a car. Come if you can, any way you can. It's your only chance." He left through the back gate while I tried to compose my expression, hide the whirlwind of emotions consuming me. My father had returned. Not to buy cigarettes, but to rescue me from the nightmare my life had become. When my mother entered the yard and saw me standing there with a lost look and clothes still to be hung on the line, she frowned. "What's wrong, girl? Looks like you've seen a ghost." If she only knew how right she was. Have you ever heard that the darkest night comes before dawn? Well, in that January dawn of 1972, I lived through the longest and most terrifying hours of my life, knowing that at daybreak I would face the biggest decision I'd ever had to make. I spent the night wide awake, my body aching from Arnold's recent blows, my mind buzzing with the revelation I had received. My father, alive, there. After so long believing in the lie of abandonment, discovering he had returned to rescue me was like waking from one nightmare only to find myself in another, even more confusing and intense. Arnold slept heavily beside me, his loud snoring mixed with the smell of whiskey exhaling from his half-open mouth. I observed his face relaxed in sleep, so different from the mask of hatred he wore when awake. How could I have believed that man would be my salvation? How was I so blind, so desperate for love that I didn't see the signs that were certainly there from the beginning? Around 4 in the morning, when the house was plunged into that heavy silence that only the dead hours know, I heard a creak. My mother's bedroom door opened slowly. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, while I heard her light footsteps down the hallway. She stopped at our bedroom door, stayed there for what seemed like an eternity, then continued to the kitchen. Curious and apprehensive, I waited a few minutes before carefully getting up so as not to wake Arnold. I followed the same path she had taken, my bare feet silent on the cold floor. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, illuminated only by the weak moonlight entering through the curtainless window. She looked aged, fragile, so different from the hard and relentless woman I knew. In her hands, she held something I couldn't immediately identify. Only when I approached more, still hidden in the hallway's shadows, did I see it was an old photograph, yellowed by time. "I know you're there, Nellie," she said without turning, her voice strangely calm. "Can't sleep." I hesitated for a moment, then entered the kitchen. There was no more sense in hiding, in pretending. "No, Mom. Too much on my mind." She gestured for me to sit across from her. When I did, she pushed the photograph toward me. "Do you know who this is?" In the faded image, a young couple smiled at the camera. The woman, whom I recognized as my mother many years ago, seemed like a different person. Well-arranged hair, soft face, eyes bright with happiness. Beside her, a tall, strong man embraced her by the waist, looking at her with adoration. "Is it you and my father?" I asked, my voice almost disappearing on the last word. She nodded, a sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Our wedding, 1947. I was 18, your father, 22. We were so young, so full of dreams." I looked more carefully at the man in the photo. Even with the worn image, I could see similarities between him and Robert, or rather Joseph, whom I had recently met. The same eyes, the same strong chin, the same upright posture. Only younger, without the gray hair, without the marks that time and life leave on us all. "What happened, Mom? Really? No lies this time." She sighed deeply, seeming to weigh what she would say next. The truth is that even I don't know anymore, daughter. I've told so many versions over the years that sometimes I don't remember which is real and which I invented." "Try," I insisted, surprising us both with the firmness in my voice. "I owe this to myself, and you owe this to me too." She remained silent for a long moment, her wrinkled fingers caressing the edge of the photograph as if she could extract from it the necessary courage. "Your father was a good man," she finally began. "Hard-working, honest, kind. He treated me like a queen, said I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. We met at a 4th of July dance, danced all night, and 2 months later we were married." I was surprised by the soft, almost nostalgic tone. I had never heard my mother speak like this about anyone, much less the man who had supposedly abandoned us. "But something changed," she continued, her face hardening. "After you were born, I don't know how to explain. It was as if a shadow had fallen over me. I couldn't feel joy, had no strength for anything. I cried all day, screamed over anything. The doctors called it postpartum blues, but it was much more than sadness. It was a black hole that sucked me in, that transformed me into another person." I listened in silence, beginning to see for the first time my mother as a complex human being, not just the cruel and distant figure I knew. Joseph tried everything. He took me to doctors, to faith healers, gave me medicine, stayed awake nights on end, calming me when I had crises. But nothing helped. I only got worse. I began to have terrible thoughts. About you, about him, about myself. Her voice faltered, and I realized she was crying silently, tears leaving shining trails on her aged face. One day, I had a worse crisis than the others. I grabbed a knife, threatened both of you. Your father managed to disarm me, but he was terrified, not for his own safety, but for yours. You were only 2 years old, didn't understand what was happening, crying frightened in your little corner. My heart was beating fast, absorbing every word of this story that was rewriting my entire existence. The next day, he decided to take you to your paternal grandmother's house to protect you until I got better. But I wouldn't let him. I screamed, hit him, threatened to kill myself if he took you. I was beside myself, completely out of control. She took a deep breath, as if gathering strength for the hardest part. Joseph went out to seek help, maybe to have me admitted somewhere I could receive proper treatment. While he was gone, I packed our things and fled with you here to Oak Ridge, where nobody knew us. I spread the story that I had been abandoned, that he had gone out to buy cigarettes and never returned. It was easier to be the victim of the story than to admit that I was the monster. The kitchen fell into a dense silence, broken only by the tick-tock of the old clock on the wall and Arnold's occasional snoring coming from the bedroom. "And why didn't he find us? Why did it take so long?" "He tried. My God, how he tried. In the first years, I received news from acquaintances that he was looking for me everywhere. But I always moved houses, always spread different lies, always used my maiden name instead of his. And then I met Arnold. Her voice hardened, saying the name. He noticed my vulnerability, my constant fear of being found. He promised to protect me, said no one would ever separate us. At first, I thought I had found an ally, someone who would understand my situation, who would help me raise you. But that's not what happened, I stated, more a realization than a question. No, she agreed, sadly shaking her head. Arnold is a predator. He saw in me an easy prey, a woman alone, troubled, with a small daughter to raise. When I finally realized what kind of man he was, it was too late. He knew too much, had too much control over our lives. And that's why you let him treat me that way? Out of fear of him? She raised her gaze, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in that conversation. At first, yes. Then, I can't explain, Nellie. Something inside me broke. Seeing you suffer at his hands awakened a sick part of me, a part that thought you deserved that suffering for being the daughter of a man I had unjustly driven away. A punishment for him through you. The cruelty of that confession hit me like a punch. Even after everything I had been through, it was still difficult to accept that my own mother had consciously allowed my suffering as a distorted form of revenge. And now? What's changed now for you to be telling me all this? She gave a sad smile, putting the photograph in the pocket of her worn apron. He came back, didn't he? Joseph, or Robert, as he's calling himself now. I thought it was a ghost when I first saw him. After so long, so many years hiding, lying, he found us. I remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. I didn't know how much I could trust her, how much her apparent vulnerability was genuine. You don't need to say anything, she continued. I saw how he looked at you, how he searched for his features in your face. A father always recognizes a daughter, no matter how much time passes. What are you going to do? I asked, tense. Are you going to tell Arnold? She slowly shook her head. No. I've caused enough damage in this life. More than any person should carry on their conscience. She got up with effort, seeming to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. Before returning to her room, she stopped beside me and, in a gesture I don't remember receiving before, kissed the top of my head. Do what you need to do, daughter. I'll be fine. I returned to bed with my head spinning, my heart divided between the fear of the unknown and the hope of a different life. Arnold continued sleeping, oblivious to the storm forming under his own roof. I closed my eyes, not to sleep. I knew sleep wouldn't come, but to organize my thoughts, to gather courage for what would come next. When the sun finally rose, bringing a new day and the promise of a new life, I had made my decision. I got up silently, gathered the few things I wanted to take, my grandmother's ring, a less worn dress, a photo of a cousin who had been my only friend in childhood, and hid them in a small bundle under the kitchen sink, where Arnold never looked. The day dragged on in almost unbearable tension. Each minute seemed like an hour, each noise startled me. Arnold, fortunately, left early to take care of business, probably drinking at the bar and playing cards with other bums like him. My mother remained quiet, avoiding my gaze, but also not doing anything to hinder my silent preparations. At 2:30 in the afternoon, with my heart almost coming out of my mouth, I took the hidden bundle and told my mother I was going to the market to buy vegetables for dinner. She just nodded, sitting in the worn rocking chair with a distant look, as if already getting used to my absence. At the door, I hesitated. Despite everything, she was my mother, the only family I knew until a few hours ago. Leaving her there, with Arnold, knowing how violent he was. Go, she said without looking at me. Don't worry about me. I've lived enough, caused enough pain. Maybe this is what I deserve. I wanted to say something, that I forgave her, that I understood, that I would come back for her when I was safe. But the words stuck in my throat. With one last look at the house that had been my prison for so many years, I went out into the sunny street. The path to the church square never seemed so long. Each person who passed by me seemed to know my secret. Each look seemed accusing. What if Arnold returned earlier? What if my mother changed her mind and told him? What if my father, it was still strange to think of him that way, wasn't there as promised? So many what-ifs that my head was spinning. But I continued walking, one foot in front of the other, the small bundle pressed against my chest as if it were a shield. When I finally reached the square, the church clock marked 5 minutes to 3. I looked around, anxious, searching for the car he had mentioned. The square was almost deserted in the afternoon heat, just a few ladies sitting on benches chatting and children running after kites. 3 o'clock, no sign of him. Panic began to set in. What if it was all a trap? What if my mother was right about him having ulterior motives? 3:05. My heart sank. Maybe I'd been foolish to believe, to hope that after so many years someone really cared, really wanted to save me. That's when I saw the dark blue car slowly turning the corner. I didn't know much about automobiles, but it looked new, well-maintained, so different from the old, dusty cars I saw in town. It stopped exactly where I was, and the driver's window lowered, revealing the anxious face of Joseph Carter, my father. "Nellie, thank God you came. Get in, quick!" He didn't need to ask twice. I got into the car, feeling the coolness of the air conditioning, a luxury I had never experienced before, and the smell of new leather seats. "I thought you wouldn't come," he said, pulling away as soon as I closed the door. "I thought you had changed your mind, or that something had happened." "I almost didn't come," I confessed, still clutching my small bundle. "I have so many questions, so many doubts. And I have all the answers, daughter. Or at least, all the ones I know. But first, we need to leave this town. We're not safe here." As the car gained speed, leaving behind the familiar streets of the town that had been my home and my prison, I looked out the window one last time. The past was being left behind, the years of abuse, the complicit silence, the lies that had built my life. Before me, an uncertain but full of possibilities future opened up. And beside me, driving with determination on the road that would take us far from there, was the man who, against all odds, had returned to fulfill the promise made so many years ago, to protect his daughter, even if it meant facing his own demons. "Where are we going?" I asked, when we were already on the road leading out of town. He smiled, a smile that seemed so familiar to me, even though it was the first time I saw it. "Home, Nellie. We're going home." And so began the most important journey of my life, not just to a new place, but to a new version of myself. A version that, finally, could learn what it meant to be truly loved. Have you ever felt as if you were being born again? As if your entire previous life was just a nightmare from which you finally managed to wake up? That's exactly how I felt in that January of 1972. When I left behind the prison, I called home and set off toward the unknown with a man who was both a stranger and my blood. During the first hours of the journey, I remained silent, clutching my small bundle, still expecting to wake up or discover that it was all an elaborate trap. Joseph Carter's car, my father, it was still strange to think of him that way, followed the road that cut through rural Kentucky, taking us further and further away from Oak Ridge and the shadows that haunted me. "I know you have thousands of questions," he said when we had been on the road for a few hours, "and I promise to answer them all. But first, you need to eat something. You're too thin, daughter." We stopped at a simple roadside diner. It was a clean place, with checkered tablecloths and ceiling fans lazily turning. I sat uncomfortably, looking around like a cornered animal. How long had it been since I had entered such an establishment? Arnold never took me out to dinner, said it was a waste of money, that a woman's food should be made at home. "You can order whatever you want," Joseph said kindly. "Don't worry about the price." I looked at the menu without knowing what to choose. So many options. So many dishes I didn't even know. In the end, I ordered the same as him, a beef stew with vegetables that arrived steaming, smelling of seasonings that made my stomach growl in anticipation. It was during that meal that he began to unravel the tangled skein of our story. With a measured voice, sometimes choked with emotion, he told me everything, from his courtship with my mother to the events that separated us. "Your mother didn't completely lie," he said, pushing his plate aside after finishing eating. "She really did get sick after you were born. Back then, they didn't talk much about it, but nowadays they call it postpartum depression. She changed, became unrecognizable. Nothing I did seemed to help. He told me about how he tried to seek medical help, how treatments were rudimentary at that time, how society saw this type of problem as making a fuss or weakness. When she fled with you, I was desperate. I looked everywhere, hired people to help, but she was clever. She constantly changed towns, used different names, spread contradictory stories. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked, finding my voice for the first time since we entered the diner. He sighed deeply. I tried, but back then the authorities didn't get involved in family matters. They said it was a problem between husband and wife, that she had the right to be with her daughter. Some even insinuated there must be something wrong with me, for a woman to flee that way. It made sense. Even in the 70s, when this conversation was happening, the mentality remained the same. How many times had neighbors turned their faces when they saw my bruises? How many times had the sheriff ignored the screams coming from our house? Even so, I never gave up, he continued. I always maintained contacts, always investigated any lead, no matter how small. Until 6 months ago, I received information that there was a woman in Oak Ridge who matched your mother's description, living with her daughter and a violent man. How did you find me after so long? I asked, still suspicious. A sad smile crossed his face. I had help from someone you know. Debbie, daughter of Mrs. Carmen, who lives 2 houses down from yours. I was surprised. Debbie was a quiet young woman who always greeted me with a sympathetic smile when we crossed paths on the street. I never imagined she could be helping me behind the scenes. She works as a secretary in the office where I do business in Louisville, he explained. One day, she saw me looking at an old photo of you and asked why I kept a picture of a child who looked like poor Nellie from Oak Ridge. It was as if fate was finally on our side. It was too much information to process at once. Part of me wanted to believe every word, to cling to the idea that someone had spent years looking for me, wanting to save me. Another part, the one Arnold had shaped with violence and humiliation, suspected there was something more, some hidden interest. What do you want from me? I asked directly. After so long, why care now? The question seemed to hurt him, but he didn't look away. Because you're my daughter. Because I promised on the day you were born that I would always protect you, and I failed. Because not a single day goes by without me thinking about what your life would be like, your smile, your voice. Because no matter how much time passes, a father never, ever gives up on a daughter. His eyes shone with contained tears, and for the first time since our escape, I felt something inside me thaw, a small crack in the wall of distrust and fear I had built over the years. That night, we slept in a small but clean motel on the road to Louisville. He made a point of getting separate rooms, respecting my space, my time to digest everything that was happening. When I lay down in bed, the first in years that I didn't have to share with a man who saw me as property, I cried until I fell asleep, not from sadness, but from relief. The next day, we arrived in Louisville. The big city both frightened and amazed me at the same time. So many people, so many cars, buildings that seemed to touch the sky. The contrast with the quiet life of the countryside was striking. I live in an apartment in the Highlands neighborhood, he explained as he drove through the busy streets. It's a nice area, you'll like it. I've had a room prepared for you for years. I always kept hope. The apartment was modest but comfortable, in a 3-story building in a leafy neighborhood. When I entered the room that would be mine, I was speechless. It was simple, but had been decorated with such care, so many details thought out for a daughter who might never appear. A flowered bedspread, light curtains that swayed with the breeze, a small bookshelf with books I never had the opportunity to read. I know it might seem childish, he said, seeming nervous about my reaction. I started decorating when you would have been about 10 years old, and I kept changing it as I imagined you growing up. If you don't like it, we can redecorate, buy new things. It's perfect, I whispered, touching the soft bedspread with my fingertips, as if it were a dream that could dissolve at the slightest contact. The first months in Louisville were of adaptation and discoveries. Joseph Carter, whom I asked to call Dad after a few weeks, owned a small printing shop that printed materials for businesses in the region. He had a stable life, comfortable without being luxurious. And most importantly, he was a kind, patient, respectful man. At first, I would startle at any sudden movement, cower when he raised his voice to speak on the phone, ask permission for everything, to eat, to leave the room, to take a shower. Ingrained habits of someone who lived years under tyranny. "Nellie," he told me one day, holding my trembling hands after I broke a glass and panicked waiting for punishment. "This is your home. You are free here. Free to come and go, free to speak, free to be whoever you want. Never, ever will I raise a hand to you. Never will I humiliate or control you. You are my daughter, not my property." They were simple words, but they planted the first real seed of healing in my devastated heart. With time, I opened up, regaining my autonomy, rediscovering who Nellie was beneath the layers of fear and submission. My father encouraged me to study, something I had abandoned at 15 when Arnold said that women don't need education to cook and have babies. At 23, I completed my GED. At 25, high school. It was one of the greatest joys of my life to receive the diploma, to see the pride in my father's eyes, to feel that I was finally building something of my own. I began working at the print shop, learning the business from the basics. I discovered I had a talent for design, for creating layouts that pleased clients. For the first time in my life, I received compliments for my work, for my talent, not for being cute or obedient. Of course, not everything was roses. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight. I had nightmares for years, startle responses, moments of panic without apparent reason. My father, patient, took me to a psychologist, Dr. Claire, a woman ahead of her time who helped me understand that I wasn't to blame for what happened, that I didn't deserve the abuse, that I had a right to a happy life. "What happened to my mother?" I asked my father one night, almost 2 years after the escape. It was a question I had avoided for a long time, divided between concern and resentment. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She refused help when I offered. Said she deserved to stay where she was, with whom she was. But I hired someone to keep an eye on her, to ensure Arnold didn't do anything too severe to her." "And him? He never looked for us?" "He tried at first. He went to Debbie's house, threatened her family. But I had a conversation with the authorities in Louisville, explained the situation. He has some pending issues with the law, fraud, small scams. It was enough to keep him away." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The fear that Arnold might appear one day, drag me back to that hell, had been a constant shadow in the first months. It was in 1975, 3 years after my rescue, that I met Michael. He was a client of the print shop, owner of a small bookstore downtown. He came to order business cards and promotional flyers, and we ended up talking about books, about authors we had recently discovered, about the pleasure of reading that I had rediscovered so late. Unlike Arnold, Michael didn't appear promising to save me, transform me into a princess, give me a fairy tale. He appeared as an equal, interested in my opinions, respectful of my space and my time. The courtship began slowly, with coffees after work, walks in the park, endless conversations about everything and nothing. When I told him my story, not all at once, but in pieces as I felt safe, there was no pity in his eyes, only understanding and admiration for my strength. "You're amazing, Nellie," he said simply. "You went through all that and can still smile, trust, love. That's more courage than most people will have in their entire lives." We married in 1977, in a small but joyful ceremony at the church in the Highlands. My father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes, finally fulfilling the silent promise he had made when he first saw me. To see me happy, safe, loved as I deserved. Our first daughter, Claire, was born in 1979. When I held her in my arms for the first time, I made a silent vow. This child would never know the fear I knew, would never doubt the love surrounding her, would never have to build walls around her heart to survive. In 1982, our second child, Gabriel, came along, and in 1985, our youngest, Marianne. 3 children who grew up hearing stories about their hero grandfather who crossed America looking for his lost daughter, who never gave up even when everything seemed impossible. My father lived to see all his grandchildren grow up. He passed away in 2000 at the age of 75, sleeping peacefully after a day like any other. In his last moments, he held my hand and said, It was worth every second of searching, every sleepless night, every frustrated hope. Seeing you happy, seeing your children growing up in peace, was the greatest blessing God could give me. As for my mother, I never saw her again in person. I learned, through contacts my father maintained, that she continued with Arnold until 1980, when he died in a car accident, drunk, as he always was. After that, she lived alone for a few years, until she passed away in 1989 from heart problems. I thought many times about looking for her, trying to better understand her choices, maybe even forgiving her. But some wounds are too deep. Some betrayals leave marks that not even time can completely erase. I preferred to keep the few good memories from childhood, the smell of her hair when she hugged me in rare displays of affection, the lullaby she sang on stormy nights, and let the rest in the past. Michael and I have been married for 48 years this year. We have 7 wonderful grandchildren who fill our house with joy on Sunday family dinners. The print shop, which I inherited from my father, prospered and modernized, now managed by our son Gabriel. Claire pursued an academic career and is a university professor of literature. Marianne, our youngest who always had an artistic soul, became a recognized photographer, capturing beauty where others only see the ordinary. Today, at 76, I look back and see a life that could have been destroyed by hatred, by violence, by abandonment. But that was saved by the persistent love of a father who never gave up, by the strength I didn't know I had, by the kindness of people who crossed my path at the right moments. I learned that scars don't disappear. They become part of who we are, maps of the battles we won, reminders that we survived the impossible. I learned that it's possible to rebuild trust even after the worst betrayal, that it's possible to love fully even after having your heart shattered. And mainly, I learned that our story doesn't have to be our sentence, that we can rewrite the following chapters, change the course of the narrative, transform a tragedy into a testimony of overcoming. My dears who have accompanied me this far on this journey, thank you so much for listening to a grandma tell her story. If you enjoyed this account, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to receive updates on upcoming videos, and comment where you're watching from to participate in the $700 giveaway. Your participation is very important to me and to all the grandparents who have found in this space a way to share their experiences. After all, our stories only stay alive when they are heard, when they touch hearts, when they inspire other people not to give up on their own happy endings. A warm hug from this grandma who learned that even in the darkest nights, there is always the possibility of a new dawn. Until the next video, my dears.